And I call the member for McKellar.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I'm so glad to be able to make this contribution with my third favourite Deputy Speaker in the chair. I'll tell you the full rankings later, but you're definitely in my top 5, and I appreciate the opportunity to be able to give this contribution in front of you. Deputy Speaker.
That's very good.
Deputy Speaker. I'm sure I'm not in your top 5 on any list, Deputy Speaker,
sure
so I'll keep that in mind. Deputy Speaker, this is a very important piece of reform that this parliament is undertaking. The member for Warringah has said many things that I actually agree with. This is the people's parliament, this is their democracy, and it is important that they know who has paid or who has donated to our campaigns. That is absolutely the case. And therefore I support this piece of reform because it makes it possible for people to know the answer to that question. And the Australian people, as I'm sure the member for Warringah agrees, are no fools. They know absolutely. They're not going to be conned by political parties or candidates or indeed political movements trying to fool them into believing that they're voting for one thing while they're voting for another. And just overnight in Victoria, we saw a whole bunch of crossbench MPs who were elected on various issues, ending plastic bags, getting more money for the taxi industry, etc., vote for Daniel Andrews' reforms, in inverted commas, that will give the Premier of Victoria, whoever may sit in that seat, not just Daniel Andrews but whoever comes after him, some extraordinary powers to literally put Australians under house arrest. And I think that the voters of Victoria, whether they are voting for a federal member of parliament, a state member of parliament, or indeed their local councillor, deserve to know where that person is getting financial support from, and for this reason and this reason only, that it has the impact of influencing decisions that they may make and who has access to them when they are making those decisions. There are, however, it saddens me to say this, Deputy Speaker, a number of issues on which I disagree with the member for Warringah. I don't think this is about political parties. I don't think this is about Climate 200 or Voices of Front groups or McKellar souffles or whoever happens to put their name on whatever front group wants to stand up and have a go at for campaigns. Because the fact of the matter is that election campaigns are about contests of ideas. Who's got the best ideas to improve the lives of the working men and women of Australia? Who has the best ideas to assure those Australians who are seeking financial security in retirement? Who has the best ideas to offer hope for Australians who are under the age of 40, who want to purchase their first home so they can start a family, so they can put down roots in their local community? They're the contest of ideas that excite me. And if an election is about those things, that's a good thing. It shouldn't be. No election should be bought, that's for sure. But it's not about us, it's not about the crossbench, it's not about the front groups, and it's certainly not about the Labor Party and the Greens. It is, has been and always will be about the Australian people and their right to know who is funding whom. And on that basis, electoral funding laws in Australia are critically important. I probably am one of very few people in this chamber who disagree with public funding of election campaigns. I think it corrupts the political process. How many candidates do we see running in elections in order just to collect the public funding that comes from that? Far too many, Deputy Speaker. That's not democracy. That's not a contest of ideas. That's just another arbitrage opportunity that certain people have taken benefit from at the expense of the Australian people. And in my view, and I'm happy to say, I'm happy to say that I believe that that is the view of very few members of this chamber, but it's a view that I hold strongly. So the question to what these electoral laws do and what our electoral funding laws should do is that they should make it more than apparent to everyone who is making large donations and for what purpose, and therefore what influence that may have on a person down the track. So when people say the major political parties don't reveal where 40, 50, 60% of their funding comes from. That's because they come from small donations. And just like any other candidate, the view of this parliament has been that people who are making small donations are unlikely to be able to influence the decisions of elected members. And therefore, in that balance between a right to privacy and a right to know, the right to privacy prevails, because it is not just this idea that if you've got nothing to hide, what are you afraid of, has been uttered by some of the greatest tyrants of the 20th century. And it always amazes me that people come into this chamber and happily make that statement, happily repeat it, forgetting it was one of Stalin's favourite slogans. If you've got nothing to hide, you've got nothing to worry about. But this parliament has always viewed and always believed that individuals are born with certain inalienable rights. And one of those rights is the right to privacy, the right to freedom, the right to make their own decisions. And so unless those donations are of such large amounts, it is not in the public benefit, it is not for the public good to actually reveal those donations. In fact, I think it is a matter of great sadness that candidates have to reveal where they get donations from because, and I stress this before that is clipped up and misused, because we would want campaigns by all political parties and all political candidates actually funded by a large number of people in small donations. Because when you have that, no one single person has enough influence over a candidate for them to take that into consideration when they are making decisions in the best interests of all of Australia, not just the electorate that they represent, but all Australians. And therefore having a broad base of donors whose amounts are small is actually critical to our democracy. And I think it is a shame that we have been moving away from that and getting larger and larger donors. And how many of those donors, for example, are simply protecting, let's be blunt about this, are simply protecting legislative bills or legislation that this parliament has introduced that has accrued benefits to them. How many times have the unions donated to the Labor Party, and equally have certain big businesses donated to the Liberal Party historically, looking to maintain their privileged position under law? This is something, and dare I say it, there have been other candidates, not just elected members of this House who are members of political parties, but other candidates who sit on the crossbench who also may be overly influenced by a particular donor or a group of friends of donors. And I think it's important that the Australian public is able to see who those people are, understand where they're getting support from, and then judge some of the decisions that those people make within that context. The second thing that I would, or the third thing I would say, is the member for Warringah and others have mentioned real-time disclosures. I'm utterly opposed to real-time disclosures. The member for Warringah and I participated in a documentary about donation laws in Australia. It was a very worthwhile exercise and I highly recommend anyone viewing it on iView. But if I could throw a dart at the heart of the hypotheses of that documentary, which I found troubling, it was this idea that I don't think anyone in this House, or indeed anyone in democratic politics anywhere in the world, would deny that the influence that money plays in US politics is corrosive. And it's up to the United States, but it is something that they need to look at more clearly and understand the impact that it's having. I don't think there's anyone in this chamber who would say that if we had the amount of money that flows through the US electoral system operating in this system, it would be a matter of grave concern. But that documentary constantly went back to provisions in US law and said, oh, well, you know, if we implemented things like real-time disclosures. Well, what we know from the United States is real-time disclosures are fantastic if you are trying to hide where you're getting your money from. So what happens is, instead of giving someone $100,000, or even if you are giving it to them in $1,000 increments over 100 days, in the end it all has to get bundled up and reported as one amount. And to the point that the member for Warringah made, the benefit of being in a political party is that every Australian can see Jason Falinski, the member for Mackellar, a Liberal, is a member of the Liberal Party, that received $100,000 from BHP. Not BHP paid him $1,000 and you know, someone else $1,000, found someone else $1,000, went through all that. It all gets bundled up so Australians can see how much money the Liberal Party received from a particular donor. Under real-time donation laws, that doesn't happen. The Liberal Party reveals on day one we got $1,000, on day three we got $1,000 from a different entity, and by the time you get to a day 100, no one's been able to keep track of where the money has come from. And so it actually has the result of hiding the very thing that electoral funding laws are meant to show the Australian public, which is where political candidates are receiving their money from. Now, I say to those who are opposed to this bill, and I know what they're saying, that this is actually about putting everyone on a level playing field so the disclosures have to happen at the same time. And I don't understand why that's a problem. I don't understand why this has become such a cause célèbre for the crossbench. They are constantly in here telling us that they stand for integrity, that they stand for equality. Well, here's a piece of legislation that is indefatigably about exactly that. So I say to them, if I may, Deputy Speaker, that this is something that they should give full-throated support, that they shouldn't delay in the House, that they should, if I may say, congratulate the House for actually passing rather than sneering at, because, you know, I think the Australian people are not fools. The Australian people know that these independents now are all part of a coordinated group. It's headed by Simon Holmes à Court. It's all funded through different, you know, trusts and funds and front groups. No one knows where the money's coming from. No one knows where Climate 200 got its $3.3 million from. I mean, there's a lot of people around there saying, you know, 200,000 plus 100,000, 200,000 from Simon Holmes à Court, 100,000 from Nick Fairfax and 100,000 from Simon Hackett does not equal the $3.6 million that they say they have in this front group. And no one's fooled when they go on Facebook and they see the Voices of group that used to be, the members of that, who all used to be members of the Greens, who at the last elections were on the campaign committee of the Independent, who was funded by GetUp, who then also had the benefit, I might say, of now there's this offshoot new front group, so we can maintain this fiction that the Voices of groups are somehow a community group. And so, I mean, you know, this is a RICO case in the making, Deputy Speaker. You know, there is the tentacles run everywhere. I mean, apparently it's all uncoordinated. Watching their behaviour, I believe that. It's all uncoordinated. But the major thing about it is it's always about hiding who they are, what they stand for, and where the money's coming from. And here we have a piece of legislation that basically says to Simon Holmes à Court, tell us where the money's coming from, Simon. Tell us where it's coming from. And tell us, more importantly, where it's going. So that the people of Wentworth, North Sydney, Mackellar, Goldstein, Higgins and Kooyong, all, I might add, Deputy Speaker, all Liberal seats, I mean, they're all about democracy. Don't get me wrong, Deputy Speaker. They're all about democracy. That's why they just target one political party. Because we all know what's really going on here. We all know what's really going on here. The left wing are now using these front groups to attack Liberals because they know they couldn't get elected as Labor members, as Labor candidates and as Green candidates. So that's what's going on. That's why all the money is hidden. That's why the front groups keep sprouting up with different names. Nothing like it's. I mean, it's like Coke. It's like New Coke, and then they'll go back to Coke Classic. But the thing is, the thing inside the can is still the same. You're still drinking the same drink. So the point of this electoral reform is about making all that obvious. And you know, please spare us the cant about community groups. there's nothing about them that's community. What there is about them a lot is about how coordinated and how much they're hiding.
I thank the member for McKellar.